Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first installment in a series from the CWI at Gettysburg College, where we're going to be interviewing public historians and academic historians that are set to appear at the Summer Conference in June of this year. Today, I'm joined by Pete Miele, the Executive Director of the Seminary Ridge Museum and Education Center. Hi, Pete. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me here. I
So,
didn't know I was the first one, which makes
yeah,
me feel even better.
yep, putting you on the spot here.
Yeah.
Pete is going to be leading a battlefield program on the 19th Indiana at the summer conference. But before we get into that, just a little bit about yourself, Pete. What exactly got you interested in history originally?
Yeah, so I've always been interested in history, fostered by my mother, taking us to battlefields and historic sites, museums as I was growing up. And I have a very vivid memory. I must have been about 8 years old, taking a trip to Washington, D.C., and it was at night we went to the Lincoln Memorial. And I remember walking around the back of the Lincoln Memorial and looking across the Potomac River to Arlington House, and my mother saying, that was Robert E. Lee's house. And my mind was blown because I think I knew who Robert E. Lee was at that point, but the fact that the general of the Army of Northern Virginia, the leading general of the Confederate Army, lived so close to D.C. really kind of blew my mind. And so it was things like that, those connections that were made that really fostered my interest in history and have stayed with me through college and graduate school, and then into my working life. And as an aside, every time I go to the Lincoln Memorial now, I go and walk around the back and stand there and look and remember that moment.
That's great. How were you able to land a job at the seminary?
How much time you got? Well, I moved here to Gettysburg in 2013. I'd been a high school teacher before in New Jersey before that, and had an apartment on West Middle Street. And every day I would walk in the winter and into the spring of 2013. I would walk from my apartment up through the seminary campus and then down Chambersburg Street, right past the window where I'm sitting right now. And I knew that there was this new museum that was opening, and I'd pass by the building every day and I would go, wow, wouldn't it be so great to be able to get a job there? And as the museum was preparing to open in 2013, in May of that year, I was hired as a visitor services assistant, working frontline, leading tours, working a register. And that was how I started. That's how I got my foot in the door. And I finished up my master's degree and was hired full time as and served a lot of different roles in education and operations, culminating in being named executive director this past May. So I'm coming up a little short of a year of that.
Great. Um, so now let's take a look at this program you're going to be leading.
Sure.
How or what exactly let you pick the 19th Indiana to focus on as a program?
Yeah, so Dr. Carmichael reached out to me, and he was talking about this idea of taking it from the battlefield into a hospital. And Seminary Ridge Museum is in Schmucker Hall, which was one of the first hospitals on the battlefield, and for first a field hospital on July 1st, and then transforms into a general hospital throughout the months of August, late July, August, and September of 1863. Well, it is established as a field hospital probably somewhere around 10 o'clock in the morning on July 1st by Dr. George New of the 7th Indiana, who was acting as the medical director of Cutler's, no, sorry, Meredith's division. No, Wadsworth's division.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry. I'm still working through my first cup of coffee here, so trying to remember names. So long story short, as the Iron Brigade is going into battle across the open fields between Seminary Ridge and McPherson Ridge into Herbst Woods, the seminary building is being turned into a field hospital, and throughout that day, it is filling up with men from Wadsworth's division, primarily Solomon Meredith's Iron Brigade, and then by the end of the day, it's taking men from the Third Division of the First Corps of the First Corps.
So that would be Biddle's Brigade.
Biddle's brigade, correct. So you see a lot of men from the 151st Pennsylvania, 142nd Pennsylvania, 121st. But it lends itself to a really great story. First of all, the 19th Indiana and the Iron Brigade, you really cannot separate their story from the story that we tell of the first day. You stand behind the museum and you're looking exactly where the Iron Brigade was fighting. And the 19th Indiana, I did a tour, oh gosh, probably in 2016. We did a bus tour where we followed two regiments from on the morning of July 1st, and I chose the 19th Indiana and the 151st Pennsylvania. So we did a bus tour where we actually went down to Marsh Creek and we followed their route of the 19th Indiana up Emmitsburg Road, and then we went back and looked at the 151st coming up Pumping Station Road and Black Horse Tavern. So part of the reason is that I had all of this research that was already done following these troops, and then but it's not just that. It's an interesting story, and one of my favorite things to do on the battlefield is really look at that topography, and I think that it's really clear as you are down, as you get down towards Willoughby Run, not far from where the 19th monument is, and then you start to walk back up towards the double Reynolds Avenue there, that you can really see how the ridge, McPherson Ridge, really blocks the view of what's on the other side. And that's one of the things that I think about as Archer's Brigade is coming up that ridge, that they don't know what's going to be on the other side. Right. And you can go and sort of do the same thing today. You don't know what's on the other side of that rise. And to think about Archer's Brigade trying to come up that ridge and the Iron Brigade slamming in, and so just to be able to see that very clearly has drawn me to that spot, and it's something that I intend to do on the tour and to talk about.
Right, and also the 19th Indiana suffered like 79% casualties. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what the number, but yeah, they're taking massive casualties. The other thing that I'll mention is that we have some really good letters from and tying together the hospital and the battlefield experience. Was uncovered a series of letters when I was preparing for this original tour, that from the hospital steward, one of the hospital stewards, and talking about just the care that they are trying to provide for soldiers on the march up here. And one of the things that I think generally gets left out of the First Corps story is what a grueling march it is, or the entire Army of the Potomac is suffering this grueling march, some of the worst heat and dust as they're coming up in June in Virginia. But this hospital steward in the 19th Indiana talks about men taking their socks off and the skin coming with it. So to be able to sort of build that into the story, that what was the health of these men, what was their constitution before they even get here. So this sort of tour open where you're looking at the battlefield and the hospital experience naturally lends itself to opening up that story and talking about, what are they facing, what are they undergoing even before they set foot or they pass by this window in Schmucker House.
Right.
So I intend to talk about that as well.
Yeah, and I think that's something that not a lot of people think about is, the condition of soldiers before they even get to the battlefield. Mm-hmm. And, at Gettysburg, especially the first day, everyone's converging there, but the same can be really said at any engagement. Yeah, that's really interesting.
And there's a really great book that I'm reading right now called, I think it's called The Howling Wind. It's by Ken No, and it's weather in the Civil War. And that's what he's following the entire Civil War through weather conditions and showing how it impacts battle plans, but even thinking about how it's impacting individual units or even individual soldiers that are and Ken has said, I've heard him say, and then it's in the book. The first line in the book is the Civil War happened outside, and it's one of those duh things. But you know, sometimes you have to remember that there are these conditions. The conditions in which they are fighting is more than the bullets flying. It's the how hot it is outside, if it's raining, if it's you know, not here, but other places snowing. So these conditions are impacting the men even before they set foot here, and that impacts the health.
Yep. Speaking of books, are there any good piece of literature you recommend about the 19th Indiana?
Well, the standard book, and I think it's right there over on my shelf, is Alan Nolan's The Iron Brigade. I think that's still the standard text when you're studying the Iron Brigade. But there's some great firsthand accounts, not necessarily the 19th Indiana, but if you look at the experience of the Iron Brigade, Rufus Dawes' book about diary. I'm also looking at my shelf there, William Ray's 4 Years in the Iron Brigade. I think he's 7th Wisconsin, but you know, sort of just kind of taking that Gettysburg experience. And then I would say some of those first day books, Harry Fonz's Gettysburg the First Day and David Martin's Gettysburg July 1 are really good for getting that whole picture of what's happening here west of town on July 1st. And you know, we'll talk about sort of the global picture of July 1st as part of the tour, but the goal of the tour is to really focus in succinctly, specifically on the experience of these men. And the other thing I want to talk about is a little bit about their politics, coming from one of the most unionist states in the Union, Indiana, and looking at, they were called Morton's pet brigade, or pet regiment. And Oliver Morton is, of course, one of Lincoln's staunchest supporters, Republican governor of Indiana. And the other thing that's interesting is the connection between Solomon Meredith and Abraham Lincoln. When Abraham Lincoln goes through Indianapolis on his way to Washington, D.C., he gives a speech in Indianapolis, and Solomon Meredith is the person that introduces him. So they're thinking about, you know, some of the more conservative units in the First Corps, like, you know, you could look at the 151st Pennsylvania as a generally sort of more fighting for Union beliefs in the Union rather than sort of anti-slavery abolition. But I look at the 19th Indiana as swinging a little bit the other way. And I mean, Solomon Meredith leaving North Carolina and walking to Indiana, you know, trying to get out of a slave state in his youth. So, you know, that's another thing we try to build into a lot of our programs is looking at those motivations and looking at what's sort of behind the men that are fighting. So we'll talk a little bit about that as we go through the tour.
And kind of going off that, was the 19th Indiana sort of an outlier, politically speaking, within the Iron Brigade, or were most of the other regiments sort of aligned with the?
You know, that's a good question. I haven't sort of spread out, but it's something to look into and get ready to be able to answer for the tour, because I'm sure that question will come up.
Are there any other main points you're gonna get at that someone can expect for this program?
Yeah, you know, my real area of interest and the area that I've gotten into over the last 8 years is medicine and advances in Civil War medicine. So I intend to spend a good bit of time talking about how the Seminary Hospital was set up, what were the directives from Jonathan Letterman and the medical corps by the time that the Army of the Potomac gets here to Gettysburg, and how that has changed over the year previous, and how it's sort of borne out. And we don't know you know, a whole lot of specifics, but we can make some generalizations, and we can make some educated guesses about how things were set up in terms of medicine. We know that the McPherson house home was supposed to be set up as a first aid station for the men of the Bucktail Brigade. So we can assume that the same sort of setup would have been in place for the Iron Brigade, that there would have been some sort of forward first aid station, probably on the downslope, the eastern slope of McPherson Ridge, where would be the first stop for a wounded soldier. So before being sent back to the hospital. So I intend to talk a little bit about the medical, what I like to refer to as medical logistics, sort of that, how do we treat wounded soldiers, how are we getting them off the field, and then the tour is going to end at the museum, and being able to show people. We have the entire third floor of Seminary Ridge Museum set up to interpret its time as a field hospital. So to be able to go into an actual field hospital and see how it would be run, and see and talk a little bit about the experience of men in there recovering, and the people that treated them.
Well, great. That honestly sounds like a really amazing program. I wish I could make it this summer, but I will be elsewhere. But anyway, thanks for joining me, Pete. This was great talking.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I hope a lot of people are encouraged to sign up. It's going to be a fun time.
Definitely sounds like it. Well, I guess that's a wrap. Thank you again for everyone joining us, and stay tuned for more videos in the future.